You didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't have anything to do with it. Slavery is both our legacies. It's mine and it's yours. You inherited the wealth of slavery, and I inherited the poverty of slavery. I am determined to change this legacy that's been left up to me. If you don't change yours for yourself, I'm going to change yours too. So it's best for you to join this one and both of us stand together.
The formation of the African People's Solidarity Committee by the African People's Socialist Party has its basis in Chairman Omali Yeshitela's theory of African internationalism.
U.S. white power portrays itself as the unassailable shining city on a hill.
But this citadel of imperialism rests on top of a highway of bones of kidnapped African people stretching all the way from Africa to the Americas.
Parasitic capitalism and the wealth and power of the U.S. and Europe rest on a foundation of Europe's assault on Africa and the slaughtered bodies of the indigenous people from whom this land was stolen.
Capitalism is built on the shattered hopes, civilizations, and aspirations of oppressed colonized peoples around the world.
Chairman Omali Yeshitela denies that there has ever been anything progressive about capitalism. Capitalism was born in disrepute of the rapes, massacres, occupations, genocides, colonialism, and every despicable act humans are capable of inflicting.
As Chairman Omali Yeshitela teaches us, Europe was a cold, dismal, impoverished, ignorant, and disease-ridden place, oppressed under the system of feudalism for 1,000 years. But during this time, African, indigenous, Asian, and Arab peoples enjoyed brilliant civilizations, trade, freedom, and the exchange of ideas.
Driven by poverty, Europe rescued itself by its assault on Africa, launched in 1415 by Portugal.
By the year 1500, Portugal alone had stolen 700 tons of gold from Africa. The worth of that much gold today would be about $400 billion. Over the years, European colonialism stole at least 14,000 tons of gold from Africa, $8 trillion in today's prices.
The Europeans quickly found, however, that their most lucrative commodity was stolen African human beings.
African resistance, such as the Wolof Rebellion against the sons of Christopher Columbus, was widespread by 1490.
By 1503, Portugal had surrounded nearly the entire landmass of Africa with brutal armies of slavers.
Following the assault on Africa, Europeans began to reach out to loot, plunder, slaughter, and colonize the entire world.
After Columbus, backed by Spain, first landed in the Caribbean, Europeans began our genocide of the indigenous people of what is now called the Americas. The flow of trillions of dollars of wealth gained through plunder, genocide, enslavement, and colonization of African, indigenous, Asian, and Arab peoples transformed Europe from feudalism to capitalism.
As Chairman Omali makes clear, the stolen people and stolen resources are what Karl Marx calls the primitive accumulation of capital, which brought about the birth of the capitalist system.
Primitive accumulation means the startup or first capital needed to birth and build the social system of capitalism.
The assault and domination of the planet transformed Europe from a backwards and impoverished place to the center of the greatest concentration of wealth that the world has ever known. Britain ruled an empire of oppressed and exploited peoples that spanned the globe, an empire on which the sun never set. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela explains, capitalism resulted in progress only for white people, but to do this, capitalism destroyed the civilizations of others and pushed the rest of the world backwards into poverty, dependency, and oppression. In addition to the white ruling class and the white middle class, the white working class was born at the expense of the first true workers of the world, enslaved African and other oppressed peoples.
Hundreds of millions of white workers left Europe to settle in the US as well as South America, South Africa, Australia, and other places.
In the US, the relentless, brutal violence imposed on the enslaved by Europeans on stolen indigenous land forced Africans into the greatest economic productivity ever seen on the planet. The enslavement of African people created the first stock markets, including Wall Street, the City of London, and the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. Enslaved Africans were used as the slave master's collateral for bank loans, meaning that Africans themselves were the most valuable capital.
The African People's Socialist Party calculated in 1982 that African people were owed $4.1 trillion in reparations for stolen labor in the U.S. alone, an estimated worth today of $14 trillion.
For white people, poor and oppressed in Europe, America was the land of opportunity.
White people could meet their aspirations and dreams by stepping up on the pedestal on the backs of Africans and Native people.
White workers enthusiastically carried out the role of the white people's state. White Christians, women, children, and the elderly actively participated in this unspeakable violence inflicted on African people.
Not one white person was ever charged in the lynching deaths of African people. Essentially, lynching was legal, and all white people held the power of life and death over Africans. The chairman teaches the struggle of African people has always been for power, not against racism. To the extent that Africans win power, the racism of others becomes irrelevant.
The African People's Socialist Party follows in the historic trend of African people for the return of their stolen land, their right to self-determination and reparations, and the return of their stolen resources.
Not for anti-racist acceptance from white people.
The party follows the lead of Marcus Garvey, who in the 20th century led an organization of 11 million African people around the world with the slogan, "Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad."
There are two fronts to America, one at the expense of the other, the colonizers and the colonized.
The struggle of African people is a struggle for national liberation of their African homeland, the unification of their people, and the return of their stolen resources. African people will be free.
As Chairman O'Malley has observed, all white people sit on the pedestal of slavery and genocide. Because of colonialism, the average white family today has 20 times the wealth of African people.
The drug addiction of white people is at epidemic levels, but the colonial prison system with 2.3 million people is stuffed full with Africans on discriminatory drug charges.
The colonial police state guns down Africans daily.
Colonialism is the basis of the opportunism of the white left and white population, the basis for why we, as white people, have always betrayed the interests of African anti-colonial movements for our own benefit. White workers, women, LGBT, and others have gained our rights at the expense of colonized African people in the U.S. and around the world.
The white left has worked not to end parasitic capitalism, but for greater sectors of the white population to enjoy the stolen loot of imperialism on the pedestal of African oppression. Therefore, Chairman O'Malley was very clear that the only promise of genuine solidarity from white people would come under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, whose strategy is to liberate Africa and all Africa's resources under the leadership of the African working class.
This is the basis for the founding of APSC by the party in 1976. The leadership of the party has led to APSC's fight for white reparations to African people as a revolutionary demand.
Reparations means reversing the flow of parasitic capitalism. The African People's Socialist Party is calling for reparations to go to their program of Black Star Industries, the cornerstone of a liberated African economy.
Today, many white people are in great distress as the crisis of imperialism deepens daily due to the resistance of African and colonized peoples around the world.
This is genocide! This is genocide! This is genocide! This is genocide!
For the first time in history, the life expectancy of white people is declining due to suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, and despair.
Indeed, there is no future in parasitic capitalism, the system hated by humankind.
The leadership of the African Revolution that will destroy this vicious, blood-sucking system is the only solution for us.
The revolutionary reparations demand lets white people turn loose our whiteness and join in solidarity with African people and the majority of humanity.
Under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, white people can be part of creating a future without oppressors and the oppressed.
Solidarity with African liberation means our true liberation from our unity with white power and colonial violence, and our role carrying out the will of a despicable ruling class that makes us the enemy of everyone else.
We will not fight imperialism's wars. We will not be your cannon fodder.
We will not be your lynch mob. Through the leadership of the African Revolution, we can find an honest and principled relationship to African people and the oppressed peoples of the planet.
Reparations!